Hello and welcome to the awesome TV show with Nikhil Taneja. I'm your strange host Nikhil Taneja and I've got an all India exclusive for you guys, just as I promised last time. So I managed to get an interview with David Harbour, who plays Chief Jim Hopper on Stranger Things.
99 out of 100 times kid goes missing, the kid is with a parent or a relative.
Well, what about the other time?
What?
You said 99 out of 100. What about the other time? The one!
David spoken about everything from his character on the show to his references to juicy details about season 2 of all our favorite show, Stranger Things. A छोटी statutory warning, since the interview was conducted over Skype video chat, the quality is a little low. But hey, as they say, कुछ पाने के लिए कुछ खोना भी पड़ता है, और कुछ खो के पाने वाले को awesome TV show कहते हैं. So one of the first things I spoke to David about, and yes, I call him David because we are obviously totally friends right now, is the show's massive success across the world. The show is a bigger hit than Daredevil and Jessica Jones in the United States, and going by all the tweets, Facebook updates as well as your YouTube comments, the show is a massive hit in India as well. Here's what David had to say about that.
One of the things that's so amazing about it is it feels to me like a very American show. You know, it's set in Indiana, a small town in the Midwest, but the fact that Indian people are moved by it and touched by it is very, very gratifying. That means that we have something universal that connects us all. I love that.
For those who have seen the show, you'll realize that Sheriff Jim Hopper isn't a very pleasant man to begin with. But of course, he ends up a lot more likable and a lot more heroic by the end of the show. David spoke about this a little bit. What got him interested in such a character in the first place?
Well, I mean, basically, like, it wasn't heavy-handed. Like, he's a guy who lost his daughter, and you see it in the beginning, with the picture on the wall, and you see it with this bracelet that he wears. But he's a guy who lives his life, and so he makes jokes, he's sarcastic with his friends at work and stuff. And so he's really a guy who's lost his daughter, but it's 5 years in the future, and he can't, like, live in that pain. And I thought that there would be other sophisticated shows where you just see this guy and he's sad all the time. So the sophistication of that kind of writing, where this guy has developed a persona, like he's developed a kind of shtick to like make jokes, like smoke cigarettes and not really care about life, was to me like a very sophisticated way to capture a character. And so I was like, wow, these writers are really smart and they really understand human being. For me, it was really associating the fact that this guy's been through a lot of pain and that he's channeled this into his ferocity of the search for Will. He couldn't save his daughter, and so he's able to maybe save this kid, and he's going to punch his way to saving this kid as much as he can.
So of course we spoke about all the massive references in the show. There were some very cool ones from coming of age movies like Goonies and Stand By Me to of course Stephen King and Steven Spielberg references, as well as creature horror like Aliens and Predator. But I was curious to know if there were references to his character of Jim Hopper as well, and apparently there were, and some really cool ones at that.
We talked about Han Solo. You know, we talked about Indiana Jones. Like, you know, it was funny, the hat wasn't in the script, and then I came on and I wanted him to have an iconic hat. And so I got this guy at this a shop in New York, Worth and Worth, to design a hat for me that maybe my grandfather had. And it was funny that it does mirror that Indiana Jones. We talked about the swashbuckling guy, you know, like Han Solo, but who's dark and, you know, angry and messed up, and like doesn't know if he loves someone, and like doesn't have that self-awareness. So yeah, Han Solo was a big influence in Indiana Jones. A lot of those, like, and also like Jaws, the Chief Brody character, who, like, you know, has this fear of sharks, this fear of the water, and then has to go confront that. The same way Hopper has a fear of like children dying on him, and he has to go confront that.
I asked David about his favorite pop culture references on the show as well, just to see if he would pick something similar to mine. If I had to pick, I'd pick two iconic scenes which made me go, I love this show. One obviously was the scene with the kids on the bike, which of course was reminiscent of Koi Mil Gaya. E.T. I meant E.T. And the other one was the scene at the train tracks, when these kids are on one of their searches and they follow train tracks just like in Stand By Me. David had a different one though.
I have to say, you know, there's something about, like, there's a scene where I I'm trying to get into the morgue, and I say to the guy says to me, like, I don't work for O'Bannon, and I say, O'Bannon, and then I just punch him. And I remember there was that sort of reference to, like, when in Indiana Jones, when I remember when the sword guy comes out, he's got this big sword thing, and Harrison Ford just shoots him. And I remember, like, that apparently happened because I guess I heard Harrison Ford was hungover and didn't want to do a big film fight. And just shot him. But it's become such an iconic moment, and I love it. So that was sort of our homage to that, which I love. This guy trying to talk himself out of the situation and then just being like, I'm just going to punch him.
We also spoke about the monster in the show, which, if you guys don't know, wasn't actually CGI, but a real man in a bodysuit. David spoke about the monster and also recollected a funny moment from the set.
I love the body stuff. I love real stuff. And the amazing thing about Stranger Things was that, like, there was a guy in a puppet suit, like a guy in a monster suit crawling around. And, you know, I grew up with like claymation sort of stuff, like Clash of the Titans. The original Clash of the Titans had these like clay figures, not CGI. And I think the way things move when they're practical and when they're not CGI is like scarier than when it's CGI. There's a certain smoothness. Yeah, but I love the practical monster in Stranger Things. It was very funny to watch him on the side of the set with a fan, like, you know, the monster had like a fan on its own. But I thought that was really great.
I also asked David about his understanding of the Upside Down. Does he believe it exists? I do believe such a place exists. It's called Sakinaka, and it's a black hole where everything comes to a standstill and your whole world turns upside down. Yes, थोड़ी deep बात हो गई है, पर दिल से दिल की बात तो होनी चाहिए ना. After all, David and I became such good friends.
I don't know, like, you know, it's funny because in a weird way, it's like a spiritual realm, you know. And there's all these religions throughout history that conceive of heaven, or, you know, the Buddhist reincarnation, where you go through this period where you cross over and then you come back.
Yeah.
And so, and you know, ghosts and things like that. I mean, I tend to believe that sometimes I do feel in my life that there is situations where the universe and I are in sync, and then the universe and I are out of sync. And so I feel like maybe there is some sort of other world thing out there, but I don't have direct evidence, so I'm not sure.
Our conversation then shifted from the show itself to David's own life in the 80s. David was probably the same age in the 80s as Dustin and gang. And yes, I call it Dustin and gang because hashtag Dustin rocks, hashtag sorry, one last hashtag. So I asked David about his growing years and if they were just as adventurous.
I guess I was mainly like the Finn character. Like, I was mainly like Mike because I sort of had my band of geeky friends, and I was kind of a little bit like the leader.
Okay.
And so I related to his sort of who he was in that, you know, I never got to sit at the popular kids' lunch table.
Yeah.
But I always had my tight group of friends, of which I always sort of felt like I was kind of galvanizing them.
Yeah.
So I related to him. You know what? One of the things that we captured so well, I think, in the series is that it was a simpler time. There was less technology, and there was less, like, nobody had cell phones, so you could kind of get lost in the woods.
Yeah.
Like, nowadays, I feel like every kid has a cell phone, and so, you know, you check in, you text with your mom if there's a monster running after you. But back then, it was like, you could really, like, fall off your bike and get lost in the woods, and no one could hear from you, and you wouldn't know where he was. You'd call the parents of the other kid, think he might have slept over. There wasn't that instant communication. I think that's really important to our story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important.
You know, it's funny you said that because, you know, I read, I read an article where someone said that, you know, the problem with concocting thrillers in 2016 is the fact that anytime something bad has to happen, you have to have an excuse for why your phone isn't working, you know, because if your phone's working, you can call for help. You can be like, hello, my phone's working. Yeah, you know what I mean? So you first have to be like, oh, it was a really bad network area, or the fact that I left my phone home. Yeah, you know, our battery is dead. Oh, what do you do now? So tell me, you know, I mean, obviously a lot of the Duffer Brothers influences from the 80s are Steven Spielberg and John Carpenter. But, you know, John Hughes was also a big, you know, deal in the 80s. So what was your pop culture reference at that time like? You know, were you into the Spielberg kind of world? Were you into the John Hughes kind of world?
I think it I think when I was younger, it was a Spielberg type of world, like 9, 10, 11. And then as you become a teenager, like 14, 15, 16, it becomes more John Hughes because, you know, they're interested in the weird, like, boys and girls liking each other, like, you know, growing up and puberty and all that stuff. So that's when I got into John Hughes. But my initial love of movies did come from Spielberg. I mean, there was such an earnestness of purpose, which I feel like we have in the Stranger Things too, where it's like movie magic. You know, movies just be magical.
Absolutely.
Like those Spielberg movies were magical, and I feel like Stranger Things has that magic quality to it.
We spoke so much about Steven Spielberg's influences on the show, and it turns out that David Harbour has worked with Spielberg on a film called War of the Worlds. Now, I asked David about this, and he had a very interesting story to tell. In fact, it's a secret, and he's told us not to tell anyone about this. So promise me, you will stay shh.
I did the movie War of the Worlds. I was cast as just a day player.
Sure.
Just, you know, like one day I had a scene with Tom Cruise in a bar, and you know, worked the day with Steven, and you know, like I had a couple lines. It wasn't a big deal, but then the scene got cut out of the movie because you know, I don't know why, because they didn't have time for it. Whatever. The scene got cut out of the movie, and then years later, I went to do a reading of Lincoln that she was going to do, and I had done this movie Revolutionary Road. DreamWorks had produced. He had produced it, and he came up to me. He was like, David, I just want to say, like, he was very lovely. Like, David, I just want to say your performance in Revolutionary Road was so great, and I really love you. And he said, I hope one day we get a chance to work together.
Oh, shit.
And I said, me too.
Oh, shit.
It was so embarrassing.
Oh, shit.
All over that movie. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to tell him, I'm not going to say it. So yeah, don't tell me. That's my experience. He's such an amazing filmmaker too. I mean, you know, it's such an honor even for him to just have said that to me after that.
Of course, before we could wrap up this conversation, I had a bunch of questions to ask about season 2. Actually, I had a bunch of questions to ask about season 1's ending as well. This section will be dark and full of spoilers. So this is only for those who've actually seen Stranger Things. Actually, the entire interview is for those who have seen Stranger Things, but this section particularly so. Now, we spoke about David as a kid, but I had to ask him about his years as a teenager too. What's interesting is that during his teenage years, in the late 80s, Winona Ryder was the heartthrob. Winona Ryder, of course, plays Joyce Byers on this show. So I asked David, did he have a crush on her during that time? Do you think he'd admit something like that? Well...
Yeah, I tried not to bring that up usually, because I think uncomfortable, but yeah, towards the end of the show, we talked about it, and you know, and I was such a huge fan. I had such a crush on her when I was like 13 years old. I mean, in that movie Heathers, I just remember she's so beautiful. I mean, she still is so beautiful, but such a good actress and so beautiful. So I had a crush on her for years. It's, you know, it's kind of a dream come true when you get to meet these like iconic women. It's such a strong woman, it's such a strong presence, and yet so vulnerable at the same time. I just thought she was extraordinary. So yeah, by the end, once she got to know me and she knew I wasn't a crazy person, I got to geek out on that one.
So here's what I really wanted to know. At the end of season 1, you see a time jump of 1 month later. You see Sheriff Jim Hopper go into the woods and place some food there. Is the food for 11? Is the food for the monster? Is 11 alive? Is the monster alive? What is happening?
Well, we don't know. Like, basically what we saw was we saw her dissolve with the monster.
Yeah.
And so we don't know where she is. And Hopper has been in the Nether and he's come back.
Yeah.
And so maybe he knows something about that other world. And maybe he knows something about, and the woods are where that tree is, where Nancy went in and out of the Nether.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something where she's running around in the woods, or Hopper knows something that we don't know because he's been there and back, and because he's experienced this other world. He knows something about, you know, how people exist there, or what they, you know. And so yeah, the ego is very much, I don't think this is the last you've seen of Eleven. If we go back for season 2, I definitely think that Eleven will be coming back with us in some form.
There's also this conspiracy theory going on the internet that Sheriff Hopper becomes a government agent at the end of the show. Because hey, at the end of the show, he's living his life on as usual, and there's been no hoopla about the shady government organization that conducted this experiment. Does that mean that Hopper's gone onto the dark side? Something shady is really going on. We asked David to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene where Matthew Modine comes in the end and he gives me my cigarettes and I kind of give up 11 and then I say that you have to promise me that no one's going to know about this.
Yeah.
And I think that scene we cut out very early, but I think there's more to that scene.
Sure.
Because I think that like they make some kind of deal that is more, it's bigger than what Hopper leads on to believe. And then when he's walking with Joyce, he says like, this never existed, none of this was ever here. So I think there's some bigger deal that Hopper's involved in, which may be kind of nefarious and weird. Yeah. And that he may have to struggle to get out of in the season 2. Yeah. Like he may have to struggle to unravel himself from whatever he's got himself involved in.
The last spoilery question. What does David think happens to Will at the end of the show? He has a strange scene in the loo, which seems to me that Upside Down is not truly gone out of his system. Why did he survive when Barb died? Why is he getting these nightmares? Is Will still connected with the Upside Down? Is Will still connected with the monster? Is Will the monster? We asked David about all this.
I don't know. I mean, certainly when he coughs up that thing at the end, like there's Will has been, all of us who've been in the nether or in the other dimension, something happens to you, changes. So, and also there is this exploration of like what the monster is. Like we don't really know what this monster is. We don't know if this monster at one point was something else or if this monster incubates in someone's body. Like I think a lot of these questions will be answered further on. We'll understand more about the nether, but right now we just know that like Will is sicker than he leads on to believe. Like he's definitely got some problems.
I also really pressed David to give us some inside information about the show's season 2 renewal. The show has not officially been renewed by Netflix. We all of course know it's going to happen, because if it isn't, then Netflix, somebody is going to get hurt real bad. That was my best Russell Peters impersonation. You don't want to know what the worst is like. I asked David if he knew anything about season 2, and here's what he had to say.
To be honest, I don't know much. I do know that they want to continue to use the same characters should we come back. So a lot of those same characters will be there. And I know that they want it to feel like a sequel as opposed to like a continuation. So you know how Star Wars was its own thing and Empire Strikes Back was a sequel. So I think we may pick up like later on where some things have happened and we won't have the yellow scrolling text come by, but we'll probably reveal to you in some way the things that have happened in the interim and where we are now. And I feel like that sequel quality is very an 80s thing, which I think is really fun to play with. You know, hopefully if they decide to pull the trigger, we can start shooting again. And really, I really want to get back to Hopper because I love him so much. I miss playing him. You know, I miss seeing where he goes. So I really want to get back.
Finally, of course, I had to, and I'm sorry I had to ask him about Bollywood. How could I not, Hannah? So I asked him if he'd like to work here, and here's what he had to say.
I have to work on my singing and dancing, don't I? Well, I tell you what, if the real one comes along, I would love to come to India and shoot a movie for a couple months. I would love to experience the culture there and experience the people. And yeah, so if you Bollywood directors, if you have a good movie out there, send it my way. I'll read it.
And with that, my interview with David Harbour came to an end. If you still haven't seen Stranger Things, you absolutely must. You'll love the show if you're a fan of 80s cinema, and even if you're not, you'll still love the show if you have a beating heart. It's that good. Thanks a bunch for watching this episode of the awesome TV show. I really hope you enjoyed this interview, and I'm so sorry about the awful quality of the video. Before we end, here's a final message from David Harbour, especially for you guys.
I just want to say thank you so much. That you love the series as much as we do, and we want to bring you more and more, and we want to bring you seasons and seasons of these characters. Thank you so much for your love and support. Really appreciate it.
If you like this interview, if you like David Harbour, if you love Stranger Things, or if you thought I used #less hashtags this episode, please like and share this episode and subscribe to the Film Companion channel on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and all other social media. And if you thought I sucked a little less this time, or sucked exactly as much, please feel free to personally troll me or write to me to say good stuff about me on all my social handles at Taneja Main Hoon on all social media. Because Taneja Main Hoon, mark idhar hai.